Well, hello again, and welcome to episode 5, believe it or not, episode 5 of Cooking in Pajamas. Yes, I'm still in my pajamas. If you're watching this on Saturday, April 25th, this is day 34 of our shelter in place. Now, I hope everybody out there is doing well, and something I remind everybody every Sunday at church is I hope that you're looking for ways to be salt and light, even during these difficult times. Well, this may be my second to my last episode, depending on if there is an extension to the shelter in place. It is supposed to end May 1st, which means maybe in another week or so I'll be back to work. So this may be my second to my last episode, but I've enjoyed doing it, and I thank everybody for their encouragement in doing these videos. I'm actually going to look forward to getting back to work and getting out of my pajamas. I've been in them for 34 days. I think I'll just jump in the shower and they'll probably just dissolve. But today what we're going to do in today's episode is we're going to cook something I love to cook during the summertime, and that is pulled pork. But I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to be making pulled pork meatballs. Now this is something that's actually going to take a couple of days to prepare. We're going to start out with the cut of meat we're going to be using. Is what I have here is I have a 5-pound Boston butt roast. Now, we're going to start out, we're going to do a little bit of pigology here, so you understand some things about the pig. First off, where is the Boston butt located? If you said the butt, you're wrong. Actually, the Boston butt is a cut from the shoulder of the pig. I don't think people in Boston know their anatomy very well. But the story I hear of how Boston butt got its name was back in our colonial days in New England. Butchers would take less desirable cuts of meat and they would put them in barrels with salt and they would ship them out to be sold in other places. And the shoulder was one of the things that was considered less desirable. How it got its name butt is the Latin word buttis, which means a barrel. So hence the name you got here, a Boston butt roast. So why is this cut of meat considered less desirable? Well, it is a shoulder, so it is a muscle on the pig that gets a lot of work. There's a lot of tendons, there's a lot of muscles in there. So it's not the type of cut that you would actually want to put onto the grill. Oh, but does it make a good pulled pork sandwich? And what makes the Boston butt different than, say, a shoulder roast or a picnic? The Boston butt still has the bone connected into it. So there you go. You got a little bit of pigology on where the Boston butt comes from. And now we're going to begin to prepare it. Now I've grilled them, I've smoked them, I've roasted them in the oven. But today's we're actually going to do this in the crock pot. I love using my crock pot. Now we're going to start out with a rub. I've made rubs, I've made barbecue sauces, and that's okay. But you know, there's a lot of good rubs out there. There's a lot of good sauces out there. And I don't think you always need to reinvent the wheel. Find something you like. If there's a rub that you like or a sauce that you like, use that. One of my favorites is a thing it's actually called butt rub. I get it at All Works in Hale, Michigan. I think it's actually made in Florida. But I use this on everything. I use this on pork. I use this on beef. I use this on chicken. It's one of my favorite rubs that I like to do. What you want to do is you want to start with putting your rub on your butt. I know there's a lot of jokes out there. I'm going through them in my head, so I'm putting my butt rub on my butt. I know. You want to put it on very generously. Very generously. You can maybe turn the lights down, turn some music on if you want. But get all sides of your Boston butt. Go around it. Actually go around it a couple of times. So you can see all the tendons and ligaments in there because this is a shoulder roast. Cover it real well. Cover it. Massage it in there a little bit. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to let this set for at least several hours. I actually do mine overnight. What I do is I take my roast, I put it into the crock pot that I'm going to use. I will cover it, and I will put it into the refrigerator overnight. Tomorrow morning, I will actually start my roast in my crock pot on low. And I will put it in there for about 10 to 12 hours. Now, how you will know when your Boston butt is done is this bone that's in here that you see. You'll be able to pull that bone out of the roast. and then you will know that your roast is done. I call this crock pot Old Blue. I have had this crock pot for well over 20 years. Any of my friends or kids watching from Alaska probably remember this is the same crock pot I had up there. I have probably put thousands of pounds of food have gone through this crock pot. Well, tomorrow morning I'm going to start this and we're going to let it cook for about 10 to 12 hours and we will come back to you then in my pajamas. Well, hello again, and through the power of time travel, it's been about 24 hours. We started out after we finished putting the rub on the Boston butt last night. I put it in the fridge and let it set overnight. Very early this morning I got up and I started it in Old Blue, and here we are after almost 12 hours of cooking. You can see I have drained the grease off. Ta-da! Drained the grease off of it. And it's to the point where you can, look at that. I was going to use a fork. I don't even need to use a fork. You know what's done, as I said, when you can pull that bone out of the back of that roast. Now, I want to thank my niece here, Jilly Bean, for telling me about using your beaters to shred meat. I love it. If you're doing chicken breast or pulled pork and you want to tear it apart rather than get your hands all greasy, you can use beaters. Take the beaters into the roast, and in the course of about 20 seconds, about all it was, you see it didn't take very long, and you have pulled pork, just that quick. Now remember, this recipe was not pulled pork, but it was pulled pork meatballs. So we actually got another step. Now, to make your meatballs, we're going to have to make a roux as well. Now, the ingredients that I'm using here is I'm going to use 1 cup of pulled pork to a 1/4 cup of roux. Now, a roux is a combination of flour and butter, and it's always 1 to 1. If you're using 1 cup butter, you use 1 cup flour. With this recipe, I'm just using a 1/4 cup butter and a 1/4 cup flour. I'm also going to throw in a little bit of minced garlic. You don't have to use a lot of seasoning because there's seasoning on your pulled pork. But I got the butter's already melted. It's a 1/4 cup butter. I got a 1/4 cup flour. You add those two together, put the heat under it, and you want to keep moving it. Get yourself a wooden spoon and just keep moving it. And you want to cook it until it comes to like a pale brown. It'll take about 6 or 7 minutes. All right. After a few minutes, your roux is to, like I said, kind of a pale brown color. Take a big cup of your shredded pork, your pulled pork. Get a big cup of it in there. Kind of pack it in there. Get it packed in there. Take that cup into the bowl. And then take your roux that you made and combine that with the pork. All combined in there. And then you'll want to get it all mixed together. And once you get it mixed together, let it cool for about 20 minutes. Okay, here we are again. Now, you've done your Boston butt roast. You put a rub on it. You let it set for several hours. Then you cook it for like 12 hours till it pulls apart. And then you make your roux. And remember, a roux is just 50-50 butter and flour. Or 1 part butter, 1 part flour. You do 1 cup of pulled pork to a 1/4 cup of a roux. You let it cool for a little bit. And then get something flat with a piece of plastic wrap on it. And pour it out on there. This is a mixture here. You kind of want to move it around a little bit. Then what you're going to want to do is you're going to kind of want to flatten it out. What I do is I put another piece of plastic wrap on top of it. And take a pan and just squish it down on there, get it good and flat. Now, remember, as I said, that this takes a couple day process. Now what you're going to want to do with your roux and your pork mixture is put it in the refrigerator overnight. So now this is going to go into the refrigerator until tomorrow. Okay, it's the next day. You take your pulled pork out of the refrigerator that's been mixed in your roux. Take the plastic wrap off. Take a knife, a big knife, and just kind of cut it into about 2-inch squares. go along about 2-inch squares. That way, give or take, doesn't have to be exact, because what you're gonna do after you get these cut into squares is take them and then work them into meatballs. Roll them in, get them little balls in your hands, all rolled up good and tight. Remember, these are gonna be pulled pork meatballs. So take all these and make them into meatballs. Okay, now we're ready to make the meatballs. Remember, these are pulled pork meatballs. They smell amazing. So what do you got? Get them rolled into balls. And I have a dredge here. It's just milk and eggs. And then to roll them in, panko and Tony's. What else? And I got my deep fryer set at 375. So you take your meatballs. I just got to throw them all in there. Dredge them around in the milk and egg. Then roll them in the Tony's and panko. And drop them in the deep fryer. You're going to want to cook them for about 5 to 6 minutes. Okay, here you go. You had your deep fried pulled pork meatballs. Now, I gotta say, it didn't take quite as long to cook. Remember, the pork has already been cooked. So it doesn't have to cook all the way through. You just got to get it brown. You got to get it hot. They look great. I'm going to plate this on some mashed potatoes. I'm going to throw a few of these meatballs on here. Oh. Put a few peas on the plate and cover it with some pork gravy. There you go. That is your deep fried pulled pork meatballs. And this is also episode number 5 of Cooking in Pajamas. And just like that, I'm out of pajamas. Well, here it's been 34 days of being shelter in place, and I just got a call from my place of employment where I work out at a shop that I'm going back to work on Monday. So this might be my very last Cooking in Pajamas. I very much have enjoyed doing this, and I thank you for the encouragement to do it. But it is also nice to get out of my pajamas, and it's going to be nice to get kind of back into work too. Our church is going to continue to live stream on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock. If you want to find us, go to Lake Huron Community Church Tawas, to our Facebook page, and join the group. We let anybody join. They let me join. And we will be live streaming on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. I wanted to leave with this. I was reading in John chapter 13, and Jesus had just celebrated the Passover with his disciples. And then he went through and he washed their feet, and he reminded them, he said, what I've done, he said, I want you to go out and do too. I'm a servant. I want you to go out and serve as well. He went on to tell them that he was going to be betrayed, and he said that he was going someplace that they couldn't follow. And at that time, they didn't really understand. And then he closed by saying this, John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. He says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. You know what I like about that verse? He didn't say the world will know you're my disciples by the way you argue on Facebook or when you're being real dogmatic about trying to make your point. He said people will know you're a follower if you show them love. I encourage you during this time to be salt, to be light, and to love one another. Thank you, and God bless.